So we're going to start with Cure, which I believe Chandler recommended. So how about you introduce the film?
Oh, me, Chandler?
You, Chandler,
Fuck.
yeah.
Did-
Not,
did-
I'm
not
not
Mr.
used to
Chavez.
it. I'm not used to it yet. I'm not used to this. Cure is a 1997 Japanese film by the great Kiyoshi Kurosawa, the other Kurosawa director from Japan. And it is technically a thriller, but it's also called a horror film to much debate. I think it's a fantastic horror film.
Horror is just it's very broad genre.
Yeah.
I think when someone says horror, I think of something very different, though.
That's true.
Yeah, well,
and
horror,
that's more of a me thing than it is part of the genre.
It's kind of like a horror movie is made with the intent to scare, but I mean, you could technically call movies that have funny moments in them comedies. You know, it's definitely horror adjacent. I'll agree with that. But yeah.
Yeah. Do you want me to give like a little plot synopsis?
Sure.
So I have the names here because I always forget character names. So it's basically the story of a detective, just sort of a regular, obviously been in the game for a long time detective named Takabe, and he gets on the case of a string of murders, which are all, related, in that the victims have a large X carved into their neck. And as it goes on, he finds the perpetrator, who is this young man who seems to suffer from very acute amnesia. But we come to find out that he has been using mesmerism in order to hypnotize his victims, and then they go on to generally do some pretty bad stuff to victims. And as it goes on, I think it's one of a really great example of finding ways to stick surrealist images into a relatively normal film, and it just sort of breaks down over time until we get to a very uneasy ending, which doesn't really end the film at all. It basically just
I was
says,
surprised when the ending happened.
Yeah,
I wasn't keeping track of the time. I thought,
oh, totally,
that's it.
Yeah.
Really, because it
but in a
feels
good
like
way.
the ending to me.
It is an ending, but
it leads up to that.
Yeah.
But the ending itself, like the literal ending, the last scene of the film, is a bit.
Yes.
Well, after that, climactic violent scene, you get a sense that it's ending when your antagonist is gone.
Yeah. You have to wrap it up.
But the thing is, though, I was into the movie just in general. I thought, okay, this is pretty good. It wasn't until that final scene where I was like, what? And it immediately made me want to go back and watch it again.
The final
When
scene.
did you watch it? Did you watch it today?
I'm getting into this too, because this is, I think, another huge detriment I made for myself. I watched the first hour and a half last night before bed. 30 minutes. I watched until they captured the hypnotist. And then I thought, okay, I'm really tired. I don't want to watch this when I'm tired because I won't be paying attention. I'll wait. So I go to sleep, go to work, come back. I decided to watch the last 30 minutes before this podcast. But instead of watching it on my TV, because I have a decent TV setup, good high quality TV with the sound bar, I watched it on my laptop with headphones. And I was taking note of how great the sound design was, but you really don't know how great it is until you have the headphones on. And I kind of feel like I robbed myself of the full experience watching this without headphones. But yeah, then I watched the last 30 minutes like an hour ago.
Or if you're like me and you have a nice pair of speakers with some good bass to them.
Yeah.
Oh, mine do too, but I was watching them at 12 at night. I didn't want to wake anyone else up, so I kept it relatively quiet.
Yeah. I don't have to worry about anyone else in this house, so
there you go.
Mine were turned up pretty loudly.
It's a tough one. It's very quiet, very subtle with the sound. It's
quiet, but it is just overwhelming in atmospheric sound.
It was, so I haven't seen anything by Kiyoshi Kurosawa yet. This is most of the time I'm pretty focused in on just classical Japanese cinema, so I don't have too much experience with J horror or anything
Hmm.
from the 90s.
Uh-huh.
And the, so one, I'm very thankful that you recommended this film and just gave me an excuse to kind of open the door to this era of Japanese filmmaking. And my God, this is one of my favorite things that I've watched in a while,
That's
in a long
awesome.
time,
Okay,
even on this
you know what?
podcast.
It wasn't until the last 20 minutes where whenever we're watching movies for this podcast, I think to myself, I wonder if Jacob likes it. It wasn't until like the last like scene where I thought, okay, this is like a Japanese burning, and I'm pretty sure Jacob would like it. It reminded me
There's
of
a
burning in a lot of
multitude
ways.
of reasons of why I like this film, and I'll get into it because I think it's potentially referencing something that I find interesting. But I'll wait until later to talk about that. But it was I have never been I have an issue when watching a film sometimes that I will spoil them for myself, that
Mm.
I just get my brain gets too far ahead and I'm like, I need to go look at the Wikipedia page to calm down. And I just start reading the plot summary.
Oh
And
no.
Yeah.
this is one of the first times in a long time where I was overwhelmed by tension and just being glued to my seat, that I felt betrayed that I even would start to reach for my phone to look at the Wikipedia page. So I just left it. This is the first time in a while that I've like watched something that was so riveting and not spoiled it for myself. And it was just a
That's awesome.
very great experience. I think the ending I'm not I'm not sure about yet. I think that was the weaker part for me, that last a few minutes. But other than that, it just the entire film, the premise, everything, the way it was structured and information was doled out to the audience slowly but surely,
Mm.
just masterful. And the visual style wasn't like super polished and clean. We're not talking Kubrick levels of cinematography here. It's kind of dirty and grungy, but
Very
it
natural.
still
It's
grabbed me.
very
Yeah. Oh yeah.
very based on human movement.
Well, that's a lot of the blocking as well. It's they do a similar thing to like Kurosawa or Bong Joon-ho, where it's early Bong. This reminded me in a lot of ways of Memories of Murder, not only from like the like overpoweringly dark aesthetic, but just the way that it's just a bunch of wide long takes where we just sort of follow people, as they sort of move around in the frame. But I think the biggest part of this that just blew me away was the sound design.
I don't know if you knew this, Chandler, but Bong is a huge fan of this film.
Really?
That was one thing I
Okay.
read.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, that's
That's
right. I read
interesting.
that. Yeah, it's one of his favorites.
Yeah, because this is what, 96, 98?
97.
Oh,
You
okay.
missed it.
That's the second time I've done it. Okay, yeah. But this also kind of reminded me. No, go ahead, Chandler. I'll get back to this.
Okay. I think that what's really great about this is in its visuals. What I love is how literal it is, and in the best way. It tells you everything visually, and you can trust that. I think what showed me that you know everything is part of the story. Can we do spoilers?
Yeah, we do
Yeah.
spoilers.
Yeah.
My favorite scene, the first one that really got me, is I think it's the second murder, which is the cop.
Well, the cop kills the other cop?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just knew it right away. It was basically me testing the film. It's during the scene where where he murders the younger cop. He walks out and he walks close to a sign which says like "End gun violence," and I was like, "This dude is going to shoot the other cop." And lo and behold, he goes and shoots him. Like, this is the best movie ever. every part of it and basically tells you what's going on, and I think that's great, like how a director can build that sort of visual trust with the audience.
Yeah, it's with that murder in particular, with the policeman, it's each subsequent murder is cluing you in more and more about
Yes.
what is happening.
Yeah, it gives
And
you
that's
an
what I love
idea.
about the film so much, that you are just as much of the detective as the detective in the film is.
Right.
And you probably figure it out before the detective does. And when the detective is chasing the guy escapes from the hospital,
Hmm.
and they're in this kind of kitchen, rundown kitchen area. The door shuts, and that was just part of me. Like the first half of the film was kind of dominated by this feeling of I'm not sure I want the detective to find this guy. Like, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Because is the detective going to be coerced into killing? Like, what? How far does this go? And then the second half of the film kind of becomes more about like how do you solve the problem of this
How do
killer?
you get over
Like,
it? Yeah, because there's sort of a fear because you're worried. You see that this works on everybody. The hypnotist is his method, and you're scared for the moment where the hypnotist uses this uh
The doctor.
on Takabe.
The sir. Oh yeah. Okay.
Like, when will he use it? What will happen? Because like it would almost just feel so strange for the protagonist to suddenly all of a sudden just become another victim.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but
Well, that
obviously this is sort of the main theme is like how do you overcome these sort of influences in modern life.
Well, yeah, that's the thing I like most about this is whenever you have this sort of lead type character who's kind of tortured by either his past or his surroundings, these little dips into surrealism kind of feel like cheesy, kind of like it could be something like a nightmare or some sort of weird daytime hallucination or a daydream. But I think the hypnotism aspect of this really makes you question the origin of what you're seeing, like when he sees his wife hung,
Hmm.
hanging
mhm.
herself, that weird vision. It's hard to tell whether or not that's the work of the hypnotist or if that's just sort of what he goes on inside of his brain. But just God,
There's
there's
so
so many
much left to like left up to your interpretation in the
I
film.
know, and that's why I like it so much because it reminds me of something like Blue Velvet, where the more out there David Lynch movies have very thin plots where they can just sort of hang these crazy surreal experiences on. But Blue Velvet is something that works really well as a literal, straightforward story that also has an insane amount of like metaphor to dig through. And this one, like, the story is pretty cut and dry as to what happens, but there's so much left like in between the scenes that you kind of just have to figure out for yourself. That's why I really like the ending, because I
Mm,
Yeah.
don't know what's going on in the ending.
interesting. So I figured out the ending, not the kind of twist ending. It's not really a twist ending, but
Yeah,
it
it's a
reframes.
gotcha ending.
Yeah,
Anticlimax in a way.
Mm-hmm.
but when the detective he kills the guy, I figured that out like long before. Like that was the solution to how this problem gets fixed.
Yeah, that was, I definitely didn't feel that suspense because I kind of knew just the way that they were framing the hypnotist walking into the room, that I kind of felt like, because the detective it's a wide shot where the detective is kind of obscured in the background, so I kind of naturally felt that he was just going to shoot him.
Right. He can only come
Um,
into action, sort of come out
yeah,
up into the frame, sort
yeah.
of.
Hmm. So I suppose the influence I was talking about earlier was I've talked about this on the podcast before. Agatha Christie and her Perot novels. Um,
Jacob's a big fan.
I see.
yeah, apparently Daisuke is too. But the last novel, Curtain, is one of the great mystery novels that Agatha Christie wrote. And in that novel, someone is convincing other people to murder, and the solution in that is that the detective is the only one, like it could never be solved in a court case, so that the detective is the only one that can end it by killing the murderer. So that's
Oh,
kind of like I caught on to that near the end of like, oh, this kind of feels like that kind of psychological killing, and I felt
Hmm.
like, oh, it probably the detective's gonna take care
yeah.
of business himself. Also, the detective's very he was getting very like violent outbursts,
Hmm.
and so it was easy to make that leap from there once I made those
Right.
connections.
It's really cool is that like he's definitely not a character above violence, above like doing bad things. He's not like a bad person, but it's shown that he's just sort of gets upset about these things just like anybody else would. And
He's a smart detective, but not necessarily a good cop.
Yeah.
That makes
Yeah.
sense.
That's another parallel to Memories of Murder that I find interesting. And they do a pretty good job at the beginning of just showing just how much this guy goes through. Like the first 20 minutes of this movie is just him kind of relaxing, and then another cop goes, "Hey, another guy got murdered," and you kind of see it in his face every time where he's like, "Ugh, okay."
Yeah,
Another
yeah,
one.
he's got to put up a lot. First, from his job, and at home he has to deal with his wife, who's unfortunately going through some sort of mental breakdown,
Yeah.
some sort of mental disorder, and he's just one of those people who don't catch a break, and so now you give him this man who can control people's minds, and he's just like, fuck this.
It is interesting how the
above his
hypnotism
pay
on
grade.
him doesn't really work.
Yeah.
And I think you could have a number of theories on why that works, but
Mhm.
part of it I felt was kind of a lot of people they kind of convince themselves that their life is better than it is. That the policeman
Mm.
said that he had always hated the other guy that he worked with, but you would never have guessed that from like their interaction. And if we take that as true, it's just like one of these things that we kind of internalize in our everyday
Yeah.
life, and that the
Mm.
detective very much felt like someone who wasn't like that very much was just defeated already and didn't make any illusions about that to himself. That there
Definitely.
wasn't
Yes.
anything for the guy to like uncover with his hypnotism.
Yeah, it's like the hypnotist isn't convincing these people to do things. He's convincing people to act on their darkest urges, just sort of removing that barrier of will.
Right.
But yeah, okay, getting back to the horror argument, I can
Oh,
see
sure.
how people would not think this is horror, but I just not a lot of stuff makes me cringe, which we'll get to when we get into Sallow. But when that girl was peeling off his face,
Yo,
or
yeah.
just below
She
the face
was
when he cut the X, I was just, ugh.
That was very
There's
surprising
very little
because
gore in this film, but
right.
it's
Yeah, it just
effective.
comes out of nowhere. Like definitely see like a lot of blood and
Yeah.
people getting messed up. But then yeah, just all of a sudden it's like, let's take his face off.
But the thing is, it's not like a money shot or anything. It's not super gory. It's kind of removed,
Oh,
and it
totally.
doesn't last for that long, which makes it worse. Because it's almost like the person didn't plan on doing that. The person cut the X and was like, I wonder what would happen if I did this. It's so much worse. But there one other thing, oh god. Okay, the symbolism. Obviously X as a symbol for death can be dated all the way back to the 30s with the Scarface movie. Here's one thing I want to know. At the end, when the waitress picks up the knife, do you think there's any significance to the fact that the sort of straps on the back of her apron made an X on her back?
Ooh, interesting.
Because that was the first
Probably
thing I
not
saw.
significance, but probably something that was picked out deliberately just to emphasize
Yeah.
that.
Well, I don't necessarily subscribe to the belief that there are no accidents in filmmaking. I think sometimes people do stumble upon dumb luck, but this guy seems like the kind of guy who would not miss something like that.
Hmm.
But I just want to talk about the ending scene, because what do you guys think happens in the ending? Jacob, you said you had it all figured out, but I don't
No,
know
I
what's going
had
on.
it figured out up until the point where the cop kills
Hmm.
the guy,
Oh, okay.
the suspect.
Well, I'm talking
After
about the
that,
ending
I
scene
wasn't
in
sure.
particular, the diner.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
In a way, when the detective kills the mesmerist, he didn't stop mesmerization or the fact that people will act on these wills when acted upon with mesmerization. Because as we know, this has been going on since the 19th century.
Yeah.
And there's the phonograph, which describes, the act of it and whatnot, and he finds it at this place. So it's something that obviously just keeps going. It just happens that the mesmerist there was a contemporary example who was acting in his area. So, I mean, just because you kill an actor doesn't mean that it stops the greater idea of what it is.
Yeah, but so do you think that she's about to commit some sort of violent act in the end?
That
Uh,
is the insinuation, at
I
least.
mean, do or do not. I guess it doesn't really matter. It just shows that, you know, it continues. It's pretty
Yeah.
obvious though. Or
Well,
who
I don't know. It
knows?
was.
Maybe she doesn't.
One thing I did like about the ending was I went back and I watched it a few times, and
Mhm.
we see that scene or that location before earlier in the film, and
Mhm,
the detective didn't finish his food in that when he was there before, and
mhm.
then when we visit there again at the end of the film, he finishes his entire plate of food, everything. He's very confident there,
Mhm.
and he lights up a cigarette with a lighter. All of
Mm.
these things could have potential meaning.
Well,
I don't know what. I
yeah.
haven't really ruminated on it that
For some
much,
reason,
but
my interpretation, and maybe this is the dumbest one, is the detective lit a cigarette, and maybe the lighter was something that triggered a hypnotist. Maybe the hypnotist planted something in her before, and the lighter
Or
triggered it.
maybe the detective learned the power of mesmerization,
Mm,
and now he's sort
okay.
of using it.
Because there is that insinuation at the end that the hypnotist makes, saying, "You let me escape because you wanted to learn."
Mm. Yeah, and obviously he
So
knows
maybe
all
he
oh
of that
yeah,
did, but
now.
I don't see why he would want to learn
That's
it.
interesting. I
I
didn't think
guess.
about that before you said that, but definitely he could have, because he's obviously on something of a intellectual level with the
Hmm.
mesmerist. That's sort of why the mesmerist respects him
Yeah.
and plays along with him and actually talks to him instead of acting like he has amnesia.
Well, that's why I like it, because you have the general straightforward story, beginning, middle, and end, but there's so many things in between you can interpret.
so much to like
Yeah.
recontextualize in your mind to theorize
Well, that's
about.
why it reminded me
And
so much of Burning. I haven't had a
yeah,
feeling like this since I've seen Burning.
I guess I would agree with this
Although
sentiment.
Burning, I guess, thrives more on ambiguity, as far more so than like straightforward, like surreal metaphor, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, this it's one of those rare movies where I literally, because Chandler had suggested another movie that I was also very eager to see, but it was hard to find, and it's notoriously hard to find. So I just went through his letterbox. I'm like, oh, let's see what he's watched recently that I really liked. I saw Cure. I thought, oh, never heard of that. That's on the Criterion channel. Let's
Yeah,
go with it.
looks fun.
And
Really interesting.
yeah,
Very
that's
interesting.
how I did it.
Huh.
Well, because I didn't want to choose something way too out,
Yeah.
in the
The the
past. I didn't.
the Devils,
But
by
yeah,
the way, is on Shutter, I believe.
is it? Son of a
Oh,
bitch.
interesting. Yeah, little Easter egg. We were going to talk about the
Oh,
Devils.
yeah.
Um, but I think
American Movie is also on Shutter. Learned recently
You did,
for some fucking
Chandler.
reason.
You're making all these films appear to be more obscure than they are.
I know. I was really excited. I paid $30 for a DVD of American Movie when I could have just used a Shutter account I already have.
Nah, I'm sure you're glad you bought that.
I'm very
Yeah.
glad. Don't get me
So the one more scene I'm going to talk about is that when the the suspect, he's in the mental facility, and it starts raining from the ceiling.
yeah.
Do you remember that? Like
Oh
the
yeah.
wrong.
way that was framed, like there was this weird shot of like under the chin of the detective up towards the ceiling, where it's kind of blurry and out of focus, and you're not sure what you're looking at first. And then the rain starts coming through the ceiling, and it's very like weird. And just that coupled with the sound design and
Oh god.
the
Beautiful.
visual of it, not necessarily beautiful. I just say like that's like film visuals coming together to perfectly create this kind of this atmosphere of unease
Hmm.
and of like
Hmm.
terror and like what's going to happen, because at that point I was very like fearful of like, oh, is the hypnotist going to use the droplets of water as the like a new source of hypnotic power? But the sound design of whenever the lighter goes on also, it's got kind of
Everything
this
was sound
bass to
design.
it that's just
Yeah.
very, it's like
I
a
mean this.
pebble, like a rock dropping in a pool.
Hmm.
It makes a
Hmm.
lot of ripples whenever you hear that sound. It's just beautiful.
I
Yeah.
mean this in the best way possible. This is one of those movies that doesn't shut up, and that's why I kind of like it.
Yeah. Oh, it's
There's like diegetic murmurs coming from every room. But I, as far as like really haunting imagery. I'm just gonna throw this one out as my last observation. The scene where the detective goes into like that abandoned warehouse and he sees like a vaguely human figure through those like transparent
Oh
curtains.
Ooh.
God,
That was
that scared the
so
shit out of me.
terrifying. Because it's not like you're seeing an apparition or a silhouette of a person. You're seeing less than that. You're wondering if it's even, because it's so vaguely human shaped that you're like, okay, what am I looking at? Is this just a convenient like fogging of the curtains? Is there someone standing way on the other side of the room? And then when
Mhm.
you open it and see what it actually is, I'm just like, oh God.
Yeah,
That's another argument I could see for this being a horror movie,
Well, there's no jump
yeah,
scares, which thank
which is
goodness.
amazing.
It's
Yeah.
yeah.
just a
That's
testament
always
to
the
how scary it is because it's
yeah. That's always the argument I hear from reviews of people like not who are on the team that don't say that this is horror is
Mhm.
basically because there's no like jump scares or like obvious monster in a way. That's not really
it's
horror,
almost
but
like
Mhm.
there's like a separate genre and it's American horror, and that's what
well,
most people think of horror as.
The carnival
Right.
ride horror.
Like,
yeah,
because horror has this much wider connotation, but has kind of
Mhm.
been slimmed down recently to this like The Conjuring or The Boy
Five Nights at
Oh
or
Freddy's.
boy.
any of
Five Nights
these
at Freddy's, yeah.
like cheap, quickly Paranormal Activity. Those are like what the horror genre has been distilled down to, even though
Mhm.
it's actually quite broader than that. So I almost feel
Oh,
like American
yeah.
horror is its own kind of
Well, yeah, because this is J
thing
horror.
now.
You know, it lands.
Well,
I think it was made after Ring, so
interesting.
or no,
well,
before. No, yeah, before Ring, after Ring. Sorry. So
Chandler, have you
J horror.
ever seen The Wailing?
Don't think I have.
you should.
Okay. It is quick tangent. The Wailing is a 2016 South Korean horror movie that is almost 3 hours long. It is a Satanist horror, it is zombie horror, it is serial killer horror, it is every type of horror movie you can make in one. And
Fantastic.
rant. Yeah,
Cool.
It's a mystery box of horror.
it really is.
Definitely.
So does
I
Cure
guess one
belong on the
scene-
BFI greatest films of all time list?
I'm gonna. This is one of the favorites that we've watched for this podcast. If I'm being completely honest,
Of the
Awesome.
new stuff,
Of-
stuff that's not on the
of
BFI,
the non BFI stuff,
it's
yeah.
most certainly one of my favorites.
That's awesome.
And even
I'm
of the
glad you guys
BFI,
liked it.
it's pretty great. Yeah, I'm super glad that we watched it.
Chandler,
Yeah.
it's very hard to find a movie that Jacob will like this much.
Wow,
Yeah, so you've done a
That's-
good job.
I've done it. One last scene that I'll talk
yeah.
about, and just to wrap it up, especially if you're a film student or looking to understand film, I think that Kurosawa basically he uses like 2 shots in this film, maybe 3. There's the lateral one take, and then shot reverse shot and like a few wides, I guess.
Mhm.
But watch the scene where the detective goes to interview the first murderer, like the first victim of the mesmerist who murders his wife, as he
Mhm.
moves from the bed to the chair and down against the wall. You'll see, especially if you watch it quickly, you'll notice how he starts in a high place, it breaks down, and he gets lower and farther down right to the scene to the frame. I think it really speaks for itself. It's a really good film, a really good scene. If you want to sort of understand that stuff,
It's very subtly made.
yeah,
It's nothing,
and especially when it
crazy.
plays out normal speed, you don't really
Mhm.
notice it. It's a very understated oneer. But if you
Mhm.
speed it up, you'll see how the characters move away from the light, away from the higher places, and down into very negative feelings. It's very good.
It is very good. Highly recommend.
I'll probably buy it on Blu-ray.
Is there a
Oh.
Blu-ray?
Totally.
There is. I
Is there a
looked it up.
Criterion Blu-ray?
I looked it up. I was less than a third of the way through the movie, and I was like,
Oh shit!
Can I buy this?
Damn.
yeah, it's not on Criterion. It's on Masters of Cinema, Eureka.
Ooh, cool.
Which-
Okay.
Still, it's got some bonus features on it. Doesn't look half bad, the
nice.
release. So
I'm curious to see his other movies.
Yeah, I will look up
Yeah,
more of
definitely,
Kiyoshi
definitely.
Kurosawa's
Has
filmography.
anyone seen Audition?
I have not. I should.
This just reminds me, like, I thought Audition was pretty okay, but I feel like this movie, they're not necessarily super similar, but it did remind me a lot of Audition, if Audition wasn't as disappointing as Audition was. Well, I'm glad we got the fun one out of the way first.
Yeah, these are very much basically a two sides of the same coin, or however that term
Well,
goes.
yeah, they're both deeply unsettling, but the one of them is trying a lot harder than the other
One
one
of
is.
them, yeah, one of them decides to use more radical
Mm-hmm.
methods.
Yeah, one's trying to terrorize you through your eyes, the other one's trying to terrorize you through your brain.
Yeah, definitely.
It's very weird. I don't think I've ever had a movie that I've like shifted this fast on, because like literally I watched the first hour and a half yesterday. I'm like, this is pretty good, but it wasn't until the last. I think a huge part of it might have been to do with the headphones. I really want to watch this again
That
with
helps.
headphones on.
Yeah, definitely do that. Did you, in the first part, get to the part where he slips into that bus?
No, that was today.
Okay, then
That was another
definitely.
thing I wanted to talk about, because that bus is just so trippy, because it's so hard to tell if they're flying or just in the fog, and I
Yeah,
love
I
it.
don't know if I could talk about that because I'm still really the interpretation of it is so, it can mean anything,
Yeah.
and it's really hard to break apart.
It's a very striking, simple image, and I'm not entirely sure where it fits into the rest of it. Well, that just just going back to as the whole straightforward story with metaphorical stuff. It's that's like a prime example where we're given some pretty straightforward narrative, and then he
Mm,
throws that in there, and it just makes
yeah,
me recontextualize everything else I just saw, and it's ugh.
I'm back. What are you talking
yeah,
It
and
about?
kind of
just
reminded me of
like
Spirited Away.
we're talking about the bus
The bus scenes.
Oh, okay.
in Cure.
Well, yeah, just chatting. Well, because they kind of look like they're in the sky in
Yeah, I
those
think
bus
it's
scenes.
supposed to be in the sky. Yeah,
Yeah.
literally a sky bus. But I love how jarring the cut to it was,
Mm-hmm.
because the first one, he grabs the knife, and like the instant his hand is on the handle, it cuts to the bus,
Mm-hmm.
and so already you're like you're in a heightened state because like, oh shit, he is going to kill his wife, and and then we're in the bus. So,
Well, I
and
thought he
what's
did
really,
kill his wife because they're in this kind of surreal state, and I felt like that
yeah,
was like the after trauma, or almost like the heaven state of when the his wife is killed.
yeah,
Oh.
and it's almost scary too, because like, yeah, because in the end we don't actually know if she's dead or not
Oh, that was a
at the
question I
end.
had because there was this split frame little insert at the end of his wife,
Yep,
right? That
yep,
was his wife with the X in her throat and all
yep,
that.
yep.
What was that all about?
Again, it's like, could the detective have done that and then like gone on to the cafe? Could it just be an apparition of his mind? You know?
That's yeah.
I mean, the movie seems to be hinting that it's just an imagination of his because it
Right.
happened before.
Yeah, basically once he sees his wife dead hanging in the kitchen, everything after that is very much suspect.
Hmm.
It's so, yeah, you never really can tell.
Well,
Yeah.
it's
Well,
also
that
interesting that like he kills the guy, and then something may or may not have happened to his wife. And at the last scene, it doesn't. It seems like life has returned to normal for him. Like he's
Yeah.
not. He's gotten away essentially with killing the mesmer.
yeah.
So it's interesting. I'm still puzzling it out.
Good old Japanese.
I love the Japanese. Love Japanese movies.
Totally. It's what I hope to go to school for.
Japanese movies.
Japanese films in
Not
specific,
not
or
yeah, not like super specifically, but well, actually in a way, but just sort of film and film history with a focus on Japanese film and
Mhm.
also Japanese culture. Um, More so, I just want to go to school for film, but just also focus, just on Japanese film.
well, we enjoyed it.
Yep.
Film school, that is.
That's good.
I could have used with some more Japanese cinema in school.
I never
totally.
got specifically tailored cinema.
I
There's a
I
Martin
took
Scorsese
a
class, but I didn't
world
take it.
cinema class, and that was the only time I think a professor ever really talked in depth about Japanese cinema. So the rest of it, I've just had to kind of feel out myself.
Mm-hmm. Oh, by the way, I'm just sending it to you real quick, Chandler. I'm just gonna go ahead and write The Wailing. If you ever want to add that to your one movie, I fucking love The Wailing.
Chandler,
Yes.
have you seen Burning?
Burning?
Lee Chang-dong, 2018.
I'll
South
also
Korea.
put that there.
You
I'll
have to. It's
watch
on
that. Put
Netflix.
that
It's
on the
real.
watch
It's easy to
list.
find.
It's still on
Alright.
Netflix?
It's still on Netflix. I have the Blu-ray. I'll send it to anyone who needs to watch it.
Yeah, send it here.
He's a very big fan of Burning.
I think I'm just gonna take a bathroom break,
Oh yeah, sure.
and
Okay.
then we'll
I'll do the same thing.
I'll talk about bathroom breaks in Salo. Actually, it's something that I thought about. So I'll be right back.